There are souls who, from the earliest days they can remember, have carried a quiet, aching certainty. This world was not made for them, not as it is, not in the way others seem to belong to it. These are the people who look around, and even in a crowded room, feel like spectators, who sit at family dinners surrounded by familiar faces, and yet sense a subtle distance, like a veil, like something left unsaid that separates them from the warmth that others seem to feel so easily. It's not that they don't try. They try with all their heart. They speak, they smile, they listen, they conform. They laugh at the right times, wear the right clothes, nod when they're expected to, and still something doesn't click. Something essential remains untouched, like a locked door they were never given the key to. And even though others may see them as sensitive, introspective, or even creative people, they quietly carry a certain kind of inner uprootedness, as if they were born in the wrong place or in the wrong era, as if their essence were tuned into something others simply can't perceive. But what many don't realize is that this deep sense of not belonging hides a spiritual strength that very few people truly possess. Carl Jung observed this in many wandering souls. Those who don't find their place in the world are not lost. They are developing a special awareness, a gift born not in noise or external success, but in solitude, in constant searching, in feeling out of place. It is a silent gift that takes shape in nights of introspection, in the feeling of not belonging. Jung called it the awareness of the invisible. It is not acquired through books or experience. It arises when the soul, unable to find a place to anchor itself outside, begins to look inward, like a spiritual radar that is only activated in those who have never found a reflection of themselves in the world. It doesn't capture words or gestures. It captures vibrations. These souls feel what others don't see. They perceive lies without proof. They detect sadness behind a smile. They know when something doesn't fit, even when everything seems normal. They can't always explain it. They simply know. And this sensitivity, which at times has made them feel as though something was wrong with them, is actually the very reflection of their gift. They are not broken, not lost. They're simply tuned into a different frequency, one that is more subtle, more profound. Their soul doesn't adapt to the surface level of things because that's not what it came here for. Carl Jung used to say that some people are initiated by pain, not by knowledge, and these souls, constantly feeling out of place, are pushed to look beyond what is obvious. Instead of trying to fit into what everyone else calls normal, they begin to wonder why normal never made sense to them in the first place. That's when something begins to unfold, something that the external world cannot see, the birth of an inner clarity. It's a kind of understanding that doesn't come from books or teachings. It can't be taught or passed on easily because it doesn't arise from the intellect. It comes from a soul that's walked alone for far too long. And once this inner clarity matures, it becomes a guide, not a guide based on instructions or fixed steps, but a quiet compass that awakens when everything else has failed, when logic doesn't work anymore, and when nothing on the outside seems to resonate. These souls don't need a map because they carry within a sensitivity that tells them when something aligns with their spirit and when it doesn't. And even though they've often tried to silence that voice, to blend in, to follow paths that weren't theirs, they always end up returning to that unspoken certainty that lives quietly inside their chest. What's curious is that others rarely understand this. From the outside, a soul that doesn't find its place can appear scattered inconsistent, or even contradictory. It jumps between paths, passions, and places. But what's truly happening is that their search isn't for something external, it's for something internal. They're not looking for a physical space, they're seeking a frequency, a vibration that finally feels like home, that finally allows them to be without pretending. And through that tireless, often painful search, they begin to develop a kind of perception that is incredibly rare in this world, the gift of sensing the soul of things. It's not by chance that those who don't fit in are the first to sense when a conversation is hollow, when a life is being lived out of obligation, when someone has drifted away from themselves. They feel it. They know. Not because they're special in some ego-driven way, but because their outer disconnection has forced them to connect with what is essential. And that connection to the essential is what gives them access to a kind of wisdom that doesn't need words, just eyes, just presence, just silence. That inner silence that marks these souls is not emptiness, it's depth. It's a sacred space where truth doesn't need to scream to be understood, where answers don't come from outside, but rise gently from the very center of being. That's why, so often, these people can't follow conventional advice. What works for others suffocates them. What others call success feels like disconnection. Because the soul born with this gift didn't come to follow pre-made paths. It came to create trails that have never been walked before. And that's exactly why their presence tends to unsettle others, not because they try to, but because their energy, even in silence, disarms everything that's artificial. They can't help it. The moment they walk into a room, their mere presence questions the masks, exposes what was hidden, and makes deception uncomfortable, even if they say nothing. Jung saw this pattern clearly. Souls that don't seem to fit are often the most deeply attuned to the symbolic, the invisible, the archetypal. They have vivid dreams, intuitions that come true, inner visions that guide them through turning points. But what's both beautiful and demanding is that this gift doesn't emerge in comfort. It only comes alive when the soul has embraced its own difference, when it stops trying to belong and begins to align with its own unique frequency. That's where the true awakening begins. What once felt like pain becomes sacred sensitivity. What once seemed like loneliness turns into communion with the unseen. What once was confusion transforms into inner clarity. They didn't come to be understood. They came to see what others can't, to remember what others have forgotten, to hold a vibration that may not fit into the world, but is precisely what the world needs most. As this gift unfolds, something subtle but profound shifts in the way they move through life. They no longer chase places to belong. They become the place. A soul that's made peace with its strangeness, its untamed sensitivity, becomes a refuge for other lost souls, not necessarily through words, but through vibration. Some presences heal just by existing, and that's when their quiet mission begins. Not a heroic or celebrated mission, but a sacred, intimate, almost invisible task. To hold spaces of truth in a world constantly inviting disconnection. These souls begin to live from a softer, deeper place. They begin to understand that their sensitivity is not weakness, but a compass. That their discomfort wasn't a flaw, but a signal. What once made them feel out of place was actually the very thing they came to offer. They don't need big stages, nor are they trying to persuade anyone. Their energy already speaks. The way they love, observe, and create is, in itself, an act of healing. And even if they still feel like they don't quite belong, even if the weight of difference still follows them, they no longer betray themselves, because they've realized that home isn't a place, it's a state of soul. A soul that, even without external certainty, has become friends with its own intuition, that even without applause, sees itself clearly in the mirror of its truth. This kind of soul doesn't follow ordinary maps because its compass isn't out there. Paved roads and fixed goals don't work for them. Their path is uneven, often invisible even to themselves. And that's why they've learned to move by impressions, inner whispers, and signals that others don't even notice. When this soul enters a room, even in silence, something shifts. It's not a loud or obvious change. It's more like a subtle shift in the air, as if the energy aligns to a more truthful frequency. People who usually keep to themselves suddenly begin to open up. Those who never speak of pain begin to share it, as if the soul that never quite fit in held the power to create a space where others feel safe enough to drop their masks. And this gift doesn't shine with spotlights or grand declarations. It lives in the unseen, in how they look, how they listen, and how they're able to be present without invading. Jung called it archetypal presence, a kind of energy that doesn't need to dominate because it already lives deep in the collective unconscious. These souls weren't made to fit into the system. They came to remind the system of its humanity. Where there is automation, they bring feeling. Where there is hurry, they bring stillness. Where there is noise, they invite silence. And they do so effortlessly. It's simply part of who they are. But this same quality that makes them spiritually rare also makes them feel lonely in everyday life. While others chase the surface, they feel something essential is missing. While many run after outer success, they long for something real. They refuse to settle for empty connections or conversations that never touch the soul. That constant search for something real, though it may wear them down, is also their greatest gift. Because not finding a place where they fit in this world forces them to build one of their own, to create a way of being that aligns with what they carry inside. It often means unlearning what was taught, breaking inherited rules, choosing paths rarely walked, and even accepting being misunderstood if that's what it takes not to betray themselves. But in that lonely choice lies a quiet power. Because when a soul stops seeking outside what it can only construct within, a certain vibration is born. That energy begins to resonate with other souls who are equally awake. And through that silent expansion, these people start being recognized, not for what they do, but for what they awaken in others. They don't need loud speeches or visible success. Just the way they move through life with that rare mix of gentleness and inner strength leaves a mark that many can feel, even if they can't explain it. Their energy doesn't seek to convince or persuade or dominate, it simply is. And in its presence, something within others begins to soften. As if just by being around them, people are finally allowed to drop their masks, lay down their armor, and remember who they were before the world told them who to be. It's not easy. Carrying this kind of spiritual depth comes with a heavy cost. Time and again, they've been misunderstood, told they were too sensitive, too intense, too different, as if their depth was some kind of flaw instead of the seed the world had been waiting for. And though those words once hurt deeply, now they feel like fuel, because they've come to understand that their difference is not a defect, it's a key. Not fitting in was never a mistake, it was a clue that they came to remind others of what the system had long forgotten that we are not machines, not just goals and results, not here to fit in, but to wake up. So even when the pain of not belonging still lingers, they no longer see it as a curse. They've turned it into a beacon. And that beacon, though it may flicker under the winds of rejection or confusion, keeps shining because it doesn't depend on being seen. It depends on being true. And when one of these souls remains true to itself, even in a world where it doesn't seem to belong, something profound begins to unfold. Other wandering souls start to notice, not because it shouts or demands attention, but because its energy resonates with a truth so raw, it cuts through all the masks. And just like that, without realizing it, it becomes a guide, a mirror, an anchor, not by choice or intention, but by the sheer power of staying loyal to its essence. It awakens others to do the same. And it is in that moment that the soul, once feeling broken for not finding a place to belong, finally sees that its purpose was never about staying still or settling down or finding a permanent space. Its purpose was to move, to stir, to open. Because its mission isn't about remaining grounded, it's about forging new paths, becoming a bridge between what we can see and what remains unseen, between logic and deep inner knowing, between what the world expects and what the spirit longs for. That ability to see beyond, to feel with intensity, to understand the silence between the words. It's not a flaw or oversensitivity. It's a spiritual intelligence, one that cannot be taught in schools or mastered through techniques. It's something inherited, awakened, something that only blossoms when we finally stop running from who we really are. And in that moment, when the soul finally surrenders to its own depth, life begins sending confirmations in unfamiliar ways. They aren't rewards or titles or applause. They're sacred meetings that feel written in the stars. They're impossible coincidences that defy logic. They're silent signals from the universe, heard only by this soul, because living in truth has sharpened it so finely that what once sounded like noise now becomes music. It finds meaning in disorder. Its very presence becomes a sanctuary where others begin to feel safe enough to become. This spiritual gift has no label, no clean definition, no measurable form. Yet it moves everything when it comes alive. Not fitting in no longer feels like a problem to be fixed. It becomes the clearest sign that this soul was never meant to fit. It came to create a new space, one that doesn't exist yet, one born when you stop asking for permission and start walking in harmony with the quiet wisdom of your soul. And even if the world still fails to understand, even if silence stings and loneliness returns, you'll know deep inside that you are exactly where you're meant to be, standing at the sacred threshold of your quiet mission, where home is no longer a place, but the peace in your own soul. And from that peace, from that inner stillness reached only after peeling back countless layers of confusion, a different gaze is born, one that no longer seeks belonging as a way to feel safe, but instead looks at the world with compassion, aware that many are still trapped in the same mazes you've now learned to leave behind. Because when a soul carries this gift, it starts to realize that everything it lived through had a wider purpose, that the constant feeling of being the odd one out, the different one, the misfit, wasn't a punishment, but preparation, a silent training ground that in the midst of misunderstanding shaped a rare sensitivity, one that reads between the lines, hears what isn't spoken, and holds what can't be seen. And then you finally understand it wasn't you who took the wrong path. It was the world that hadn't yet learned how to hold your shape. But you didn't come here to be shaped. You came to remember how the world itself is reshaped when a soul chooses to live from its truth, unapologetically. At this point in your journey, you no longer seek external permission. You no longer wait for someone to validate your steps, because something within you has been lit, and it won't go out. A soft, steady fire. One that doesn't burn, but transforms. One that asks for no spotlight, but still lights the way. A fire that reveals instead of consuming. This is your gift, awakened only in those who've known the rawness of the soul, who've lived in the margins, in the silence, in the spaces where no one claps. But everything is revealed. A gift that turns you into a guide without trying, a lighthouse without seeking, a sanctuary without saying a word. When a soul embodies this kind of gift, it begins to vibrate at a frequency beyond words. It's no longer measured by visible success, nor defined by labels, nor validated by belonging. She becomes invisible to the eyes of the ordinary world, yet shines brightly for those who, like her, are beginning to awaken. This soul no longer seeks to fill voids, but to share her fullness. She no longer waits for the world to tell her who she is, because she has remembered it from within. She has journeyed inward, toward that sacred place where masks hold no meaning and where authenticity becomes the only true compass. And from that space, she begins to walk in silence, but with unstoppable strength, because she knows she doesn't need to convince anyone or prove anything. Her very presence already brings transformation. Her gaze already opens paths. Her energy is already medicine for those who come close. This gift is not about having answers, but about holding space for the mystery. It's not about teaching, but about embodying. It's not about leading through control, but through the quiet example of someone who has learned to live in harmony with her soul. And though the path won't always be easy, and many times it will still feel like you're alone, like no one else feels this way, like you're moving against the current. Now you know it's not a weakness. It's a sign, a living proof that you are fulfilling your deepest function. To be a quiet light in a world that still screams too much, because there is a kind of strength that doesn't need to raise its voice to be felt, a kind of wisdom that isn't passed down through words, but through presence. It's the wisdom of a soul that has learned to hold its own silence without needing anyone else to fill it, of a spirit that has found value in its difference and meaning in its solitude. When you hold this gift, you no longer ask the world to understand you. You stop needing to justify your depth or hide your sensitivity just to belong. Instead, you cultivate a fertile inner silence where the subtlest truths reveal themselves effortlessly and where every experience becomes a seed of awareness. And from there, from that depth where few dare to dwell, you begin to see clearly, not with the mind that seeks to label everything, but with the soul that feels, that senses, that simply knows without knowing how it knows. This spiritual gift is the ability to see beyond the veil, to perceive when someone says one thing but feels another, to detect the wounds that have never been spoken, the emptiness hiding beneath a practiced smile. It's an uncomfortable gift, because often you'll witness what others try to hide and feel what they haven't realized they're expressing. But it is also a sacred gift, because through it, you can offer presence where there was only noise before. You can create stillness where there was once only hurry. You become a quiet channel of transformation for those who haven't yet dared to look inward. Not every soul is ready for this kind of connection. but you are because your story, your pain, your inner exiles have shaped you for exactly this, to be a bridge between what is seen and what is hidden, to hold what cannot be explained, to embody a truth that needs no announcement, because it speaks through every gesture you make. There comes a point in this journey when you realize something essential. You are not here to fit in. You are here to awaken. Your discomfort was never a flaw, but a sign. And every moment you felt out of place was really your soul whispering to you, reminding you that you belong to something larger, deeper, and far more real. Souls with this gift are not defined by what they achieve, but by what they quietly transform. They are invisible catalysts for change. When they arrive, something shifts, even if no one can quite explain how. They radiate a frequency that cannot be copied because it rises from having walked through their own darkness and come back with clearer eyes and a softer heart. And that is what sets them apart. They don't need to prove their worth because it's already reflected in how they exist in the world. They don't need to persuade anyone of their path. Their alignment speaks for itself. They don't seek the spotlight, yet they are unforgettable. They don't force doors open, but somehow they still walk through. It's not always about being understood. Sometimes true strength lies in understanding yourself, even when everything outside seems to push you into doubt. Souls that don't find their place in this visible world are actually deeply rooted in another plane, one that isn't measured by possessions or roles, but by vibration and inner truth. When you carry this kind of gift within, you develop a sensitivity that perceives what others can't even begin to suspect. You can sense a shift in the air with just one unspoken word. You can feel sorrow hiding behind forced laughter, confusion behind what looks like confidence. You don't analyze it, you just know, as if your soul were tuned into invisible frequencies that translate the hidden language of the spirit. And that changes you. It makes you more selective about the places you enter, the people you allow in, the conversations you choose to stay in. You realize there are words that drain you and silences that heal. And you begin to choose silence more and more, not as escape, but as truth. In that silence, you start to hear what the soul wants to say. You learn that life doesn't always shout. Sometimes its greatest revelations arrive in the whisper of intuition, in a feeling that settles in your chest without reason, in a certainty that makes no logical sense, but feels too clear to deny. And that's the language of this gift. It doesn't impose itself. It's not taught. It isn't something you prove. It's something you become. Because when it truly lives inside you, there's no need to convince anyone. Your very presence speaks it. Your eyes express it. Your way of being reflects it, even when you're not trying. And slowly, you begin to realize it wasn't that you didn't belong. It was that your place had never been named before. You are the one who came to shape it. With time, you begin to recognize others who carry it too, not by what they say or how they present themselves, but by the depth you feel when you're near them. There's a shared frequency, a quiet kind of knowing. Like both souls remember, they come from the same origin, even if they've never met before. There's no need to explain, because what matters has already been understood in silence. That's when you begin to see what this gift is really for. It wasn't given to isolate you, but to refine you, to sharpen your sensitivity until it becomes your compass, guiding you to read maps others can't see, and to walk paths that haven't yet been drawn. Because this gift is also a call to be a pioneer of the soul, a builder of spaces where others can also rest. Many mistake this way of feeling for weakness. They think someone who doesn't fit in lacks strength. But they don't realize that staying true to yourself in a world that rewards masks takes a kind of bravery not everyone has. To live from the soul, when most live through their image, you need a quiet kind of courage, one born of deep self-love. That's why the ones who carry this gift don't shout their wisdom, they don't preach or dominate. Yet wherever they walk, something blossoms. Wherever they go, something shifts. And though they might not even know it, their very existence is an answer to those who had started to lose faith. You could also call it a sacred fire, not the kind that burns outward, but one that glows within and stays alive, even through the longest nights. It's a calm flame, but it never fades. It doesn't scorch, it illuminates, it doesn't destroy, it reveals. And when it lives in you, everything that once felt unclear begins to make sense in an entirely new way. One that doesn't rely on rational explanations, but on inner resonance. You begin to understand why you always felt out of place in rooms where everyone else seemed to belong. Why did shallow conversations drain you so quickly? Why did routines, which others found comforting, feel like invisible cages to you? It wasn't that you were wrong, it's just that your soul was attuned to other realities, and anything that didn't match that frequency felt foreign to you. There are souls like this, who cannot stay long in shallow places. Souls who seek real beauty, not appearances, genuine connection, not empty decorations. They live with an internal compass that always points towards something greater, beyond what is seen and spoken. That sensitivity sometimes hurts, because it perceives what others ignore. But it is also the door to a fuller, more aligned, more authentic life, where every gesture, every choice, even every silence, becomes a way of honoring what dwells within. And although you sometimes feel like you walk alone, you are not. There are others like you, beings who feel without proof, who know without having learned, who wake up with the feeling of having a mission they cannot yet name. There are no maps for this path, but there are signs, encounters, synchronicities, and an invisible force that accompanies you, even in your most uncertain steps. If something within you stirred as you heard these words, don't ignore it. That inner vibration is not a coincidence. It's a silent confirmation, a whisper from your soul, telling you that what lives inside you is real, awake, and yearning to be seen. Maybe for years, you believed you were the problem. Maybe you thought your sensitivity was a flaw, a weakness that made you different in the wrong ways. You tried to hide your depth, your emotions, your tenderness. You told yourself to toughen up, to fit in, to stop feeling so much. But now, slowly, you're beginning to understand that what sets you apart isn't something to be ashamed of. In fact, it's your greatest strength. It's your signature, your language, your calling. It's what allows you to feel the world with such intensity, to connect in ways others can't always explain. So even when the path feels uncertain, even when your steps are misunderstood by those around you, keep going. Don't abandon yourself just to belong somewhere you were never meant to fit in. Don't quiet your voice just to make others comfortable. Stay close to what you feel, even when you can't find the right words to describe it. Trust that your truth knows where it's going, even when your mind doubts it. You're not alone in this. Scattered across the world, there are others just like you, souls waking up, remembering who they really are beneath all the noise and expectations. They too have been told they were too much. They too have questioned their worth in a world that rarely sees the beauty in the invisible. But now, like you, they're finding their way back. They're softening into their truth, reconnecting with the pulse of something ancient, something deep and alive that was never really lost, only buried. So thank you. Thank you for allowing these words to walk with you, even for just a few minutes. If something here spoke to your heart, if something here reminded you of the fire you carry inside, don't let it go unnoticed. Share it. Someone else out there might need this message as much as you did. And if you feel called to keep walking this path together, to keep exploring the quiet, sacred terrain of your inner world, then I invite you to stay close. Subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications, because what you're experiencing isn't a coincidence. It's part of your awakening.